Good to have you with us on the special weekend edition of the Urban Debate. Prime Minister Modi addressed the world leaders at United Nations General Assembly with focus on India's global contribution in fighting COVID, in fighting climate change, and of course, in fighting terrorism. Prime Minister Modi emphasizing that there is a big threat when it comes to extremism and regressive thinking. He also spoke about the fact that the world needs to ensure that the Afghan soil is not used for terror purposes. Let me take you to the top takeaways. He began by speaking on COVID and India's efforts in fighting COVID and vaccination. He said that I'm also inviting vaccine makers from across the world to come and make their vaccines in India. He then went on to slam extremism, calling it the biggest threat that the world faces right now. A theme about fighting terror that Prime Minister Modi has actually repeatedly raised on global platforms, including United Nations. Apart from this, he also spoke about Afghan soil should not be used for terror. Afghanistan, in fact, has been a key theme during this visit of his to United States, from the Quad Summit to the bilaterals with various nations, including the bilateral with United States and President Biden. The fact of how the world needs to now tackle Afghanistan was discussed. He took a dig at China, China's attempts to expand its strength and control and influence over the seas and South China Sea, and said that seas are not for expansionism but are in fact for free trade across the world. That was one of the other big takeaways that came. He highlighted the values of democracy. He also spoke about climate change, spoke about India's efforts to tackle climate change, something again that India has been at the forefront of. And like I said repeatedly in his speech, you saw mentions of India's belief in pluralism, in diversity, in democratic values, and how India can be a big leader when it comes to bringing in reforms and transforming the world. When India reforms, the world transforms, he said, highlighting the values that are important even as we move ahead with technology changes. What does this mean? All of these aspects covered. How should the world read it? And what are the biggest takeaways? Those are the things we're going to be discussing tonight as our experts decode Prime Minister Modi's address. But first up, excerpts from his comments.
हमारे समंदर अंतर्राष्ट्रीय व्यापार की लाइफलाइन भी है। इन्हें हमें एक्सपांशन और एक्सक्लूजन की दौड़ से बचाकर रखना होगा। रूल बेस्ड वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर को सशक्त करने के लिए अंतर्राष्ट्रीय समुदाय को एक सुर में आवाज उठानी ही होगी।
As we move along, we're going to play more comments that he made during his speech, and we address them one by one. I say good evening to Padma Rao Sundarji, senior foreign correspondent, joining me this evening. Chirayu Thakur, foreign affairs expert, currently associated with the National University of Singapore. Mr. K.P. Nair, strategic affairs expert. Professor Sheetal Sharma, Center for European Studies, School of International Studies, JNU. Ambassador Anil Trigunyat joins me this evening as well. In fact, let me start off with Ambassador Trigunyat and ask him, for you, Ambassador, what was the biggest takeaway of what Prime Minister Modi said tonight?
The biggest takeaway was, when India reforms, world transforms. You see, it clearly says that India has a great place in the world. India has arrived. And therefore, India and the rest of the things he has very clearly articulated, whether it was our efforts to fight the COVID, or to fight the climate change, or to fight the terrorism or combat it. So his 3 C's actually take it away and very clearly conveyed it to the rest of the world, that the action needs to be taken in all these 3, and India is ready and is already in the lead. And also projecting India as the future destination for joint venture, technology transfer, and all kinds of things he has hinted at. And I think that the best thing is that the way he put the India's democratic perspective in order to convey that message that democracy can deliver and democracy has delivered. So these are, I think, some of the very forceful arguments that he has provided for India's stance on these very important challenges that the world is facing today.
Yes, in fact, let's start off with that about the role that India can play at a global level, and India as a democracy that has pluralistic values and believes in diversity and believes that democracy is the only way to go forward. Now, Padma Rao Sundarji, standing in New York, in the United States of America, a nation where a lot of their media actually constantly criticizes Prime Minister Modi and his government for a handling of various of issues. Do you feel there was also a need for him to emphasize on this and to highlight these values, considering that there are so many who continue to question his leadership and his government on these aspects?
Good evening, Tanvi. No, I don't think there was any need overall. I think it was wise that he left out the subject of, discussing how the United States media, by and large, tends to view him. Overall, I would say, Tanvi, it was a very slick and very sophisticated and sharp speech. It cleverly did not mention certain things. As you pointed out, it did not mention Pakistan or China by name, but it certainly indicated that both these countries are on India's radar as far as terrorism across India, both from across the border as well as via Afghanistan, and expansionism in the Indian Ocean is concerned. Again, if you remember, it was interesting that he did not call it the Indo-Pacific, but he said, Hamare Samandar, referring more generally to the waters in our immediate region. So this, to me, was a sign that India is not going to get pulled into any military action in the South China Sea, for instance, or in any other part of the Indo-Pacific that is not immediately relevant to it. Now, if you notice, if you juxtapose Prime Minister Imran Khan's speech to that of our Prime Minister, of India's Prime Minister, you will see that Pakistan's speech was so India-centric, whereas the Indian Prime Minister, it was very sophisticated of him not to mention those countries by name at all. So I think, similarly to answer your question, I think it was just as well that he left out the relatively trivial subject of what the media in the United States views him as.
Yeah, in fact, what you said, and I think that's gradually become a part of Prime Minister's address. It's more statesman-like, versus what you see his counterpart from Pakistan do repeatedly. I mean, it's the same speech ad nauseum, year after year after year, that is raised by Pakistan. We respond to it, and then Prime Minister Modi comes and talks over, about a set of several other issues. Now, Chirayu Thakur, contrary to what a lot within the media may want to do, which is to make this about India and Pakistan and terror by Pakistan and terror on Pakistan's soil, Afghanistan's soil, there were several other important aspects that Prime Minister did raise, and I believe are important if India is to be taken seriously at the larger platform, isn't it?
Tanvi, thank you first of all for having me.
Well, we seem to have a bit of a technical glitch there with Mr. Thakur's feed. I'm going to go back to him in just a bit. Let me take that question across to KP Nair.
Can you repeat the question, please, briefly?
How would you view the fact that Prime Minister Modi didn't really, focus just on Pakistan's terror or responding to Imran Khan, but actually emphasize on several other important issues from COVID to climate change and even relevance of United Nations for that?
Well, traditionally, Indian Prime Minister's speeches at the United Nations General Assembly have been statesman-like. If you compare it to Pakistan, for example, since you referred to Pakistan, I think that it's unfair to compare India and Pakistan in a forum like the United Nations General Assembly, because India is head and shoulders above Pakistan. India stands on its own in the UN platform. It's a big contributor to UN peacekeeping. India has been involved in the United Nations right from the beginning, from the formation of the United Nations. So Indian speeches have always been statesman-like. And the Prime Minister has lived up to that tradition. But this year, I noticed that the Prime Minister, when he arrived at the United Nations, had a spring in his feet, you know. That is, I believe, for two reasons. One is the day before he addressed the United Nations, India won a prestigious election in the United Nations. The Controller and Auditor General of India has been elected as the external auditor for the next 6 years of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, this, if I may dwell on it a little bit, is very significant because although India is a leading force in the IAEA, it is still, in a way, the odd man out because it is one of the 3 countries in the world which has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It has not signed the CTBT, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So India is not exactly in the same league as most of the countries in the IAEA General Assembly. And to win an election convincingly in the IAEA is very prestigious. And I think when the Prime Minister arrived at the United Nations, he was very conscious of this prestigious victory. The other reason why there is spring in his steps was because before he arrived at the UN, when he met President Biden in Washington, Joe Biden, Biden categorically supported India's inclusion as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council as and when it is reformed. And this is the first time that a US president has categorically supported India's inclusion. Obama did when he came to Delhi, but it was rather wishy-washy. You know, it was neither here and there. Whereas Biden's statement today to the Prime Minister is categorical. And Biden, you know, United States has, Obama supported India's permanent membership, but US was not in favor of Germany being included. Japan, of course, yes, and it was ambivalent about Brazil. But now, Biden also says other like-minded countries, you see. And 2 days ago, there was a meeting of the G4, the group of 4, India, Brazil, Japan, Germany, which is pushing for Security Council reform collectively.
Right.
And after the meeting of the G4, when Biden refers to this, as like India and like-minded countries for inclusion in the Security Council, it is a big shot in the arm for India's effort. So when the Prime Minister arrived in New York, before his speech, I think he was very conscious of the fact that India was head and shoulders above other countries addressing the General Assembly. In fact, 109 heads of state are physically addressing the general debate this year.
Correct.
And India stands out for these reasons that I outlined, and that was reflected very much in the style of Prime Minister's delivery as much as the substance of his speech.
Okay, since you've raised this issue, let's talk a little bit more about India's bid for a permanent seat at UNSC and the endorsement that it has got right now. Professor Sheetal Sharma, will this change make a significant impact on India's hopes? And I want to link it to what we've been also saying at UN platform for last couple of years, including this time, where Prime Minister Modi again said if the UN has to keep itself relevant, it has to improve its effectiveness, enhance its reliability. We've also been pushing for larger reforms at United Nations, keeping it with times.
If we look at the general theme of the conference this year, this is very broad. It talks about COVID, it talks about resilience, it talks about addressing the needs of the planet, it talks about sustainable development and rights of the people and everything. In the short speech that Prime Minister delivered today, he actually addressed each and every theme of the broad theme that is laid down for the year. Now, it is very interesting what KP Nair brought about, that there were two important reasons which led to, a kind of confidence that Indian Prime Minister had before he entered for the speech. But at the same time, if you look at the situation from the prism of international relations, other than these two important things, there are other factors responsible also. And I would bring that to the table. In the last 2 years, a lot of things have changed globally. Particularly, COVID has brought a significant change in the global dynamics. And the other thing is the Afghan withdrawal of the US forces from Afghanistan. Now, what these two things have done? In both the cases, two members, the permanent members of the Security Council, are involved, China and US in the second case. Now, Chinese image has got a tremendous beating. It has nosedived to the lowest of the trust level that China could have ever experienced in its history. Apart from the other things that China was engaging in, the trade relations and expansionism and everything, all the needle of suspicion was towards China, and China's image has taken a very, very hard beating because of the COVID. And it has given a chance, along with the South China Sea and other issues that China is flexing its military muscles on, China has given a chance to the world to get united against China, and there is a rise of the anti-China sentiment. Now, this actually gives confidence to India, because India has been trying to project this for a long period of time. There were no takers for it. Just like the case of terrorism, for a long period of time, we were suffering and there were no takers of it. The second issue is that the hasty withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan. Now, US has also faced a similar kind of beating in its image. And remember, in international relations and global dynamics, perceptions do matter, and everybody is conscious of their image. Now, US has been criticized. There have been, protests inside US as well. That why did they leave Afghanistan in such a situation, and the kind of mess that is created in Afghanistan post their withdrawal? Why this has happened? Why this decision was taken? The US has decided about the withdrawal long back. Since 2015, it was said that there will be no boots on Afghanistan and things like that. But suddenly, the decision has actually hit image not just of US, but also of the US president. Now, under these two set of circumstances, there is a change. US did not worry about its image for a long period of time unless the world was unipolar in nature. But now, since it has become multipolar, and there is a multi-sphere, multifaceted kind of areas where you have trade, you have democracy, where you have peace building, all other things, there are multiple polars in the world. So US certainly has to take care of or bother about the kind of beating of its image. Now, what India has to get out of this? This was exactly a very important and significant year of UNGA, where Prime Minister is making a statement in which, without naming or shaming anybody, he has actually targeted each and every one of these individual players, be it matter of UN Security Permanent Members or the other people, those who are around in our neighborhood, China, Pakistan, or anybody like that. Now, this is very significant. What do we take out of this?
Okay.
He emphasized upon rights of people. And I would again say, the way I started, that he has actually addressed every possible theme which is there as part of the broad theme of this year's General Assembly. And particularly about rights of people, about diversity, about vibrant democracy in India, about tolerance, multiculturality, cultural pluralism, everything fits the bill, because this is where you have to showcase. And if you compare it with Pakistan, the Premier talks about all that he has been doing for past 4, 5, 6 or almost years together at UN Assembly, talking about Pakistan, bringing Kashmir issue, and all other things which are absolutely, this stage is not meant for all those things. Right. And our Prime Minister was very particular about showcasing what India has, the potential, the capabilities, the potential to exploit its relationship with other countries, and inviting people to actually collaborate and cooperate with us in the process of development.
Okay, fair enough. Let me also get the opening remarks from Mr. Thakkar. I believe he's back with us and we should be able to hear him. And then we'll break it down and, take a couple of points that our panelists have raised. Yes, Mr. Thakkar.
Tanvi, thank you first of all for having me. I hope I'm
yes,
audible now. Yes, okay. So my first cut on Prime Minister's speeches, it checked all the boxes with a delightful brevity. That is how I would like to put it. And since there were a couple of references to the premier of our neighborhood, I would like to say his 26-minute speech was repetitive and soporific as bad as it can get. You don't give history lectures in the United Nations General Assembly. In 12 odd minutes, Prime Minister touched upon most themes. But if I had to, like as you said, break it down, and we'll like analyze it in more detail. But apart from the geopolitics that we immediately jump into, the first part of his speech was absolutely focused on what India is. And here he is very concisely telling the world that despite the limitations of the resources, and he said this without mincing words, that we are not a country with absolutely unlimited resources. With the limitations of resources that India has achieved something very dramatic in terms of the standard of living of people. And when you talk to a global audience, when you talk to the Committee of Nations, you not only just quibble about what is going on with China, or what is wrong with the geopolitics of the world, or what is broken in the global multilateral system. You present an alternative positive vision. And here Prime Minister says that, look, we have developed, or we are in the process of developing, and there are certain qualities, people-centric qualities in our governance systems that you can emulate. And that is a very powerful message. The subtlety of it, if you recognize, Prime Minister is talking to the world and saying we have an alternative global model of governance, and here we are working with the global community without bullying anyone. So there is a seamless transition of the governance model that we have at home, and the message that we want to give to the global community.
Okay, fair enough. Let me just play out one of the other comments, since we are talking so much, about his commentary on terror as well. Let's listen to an excerpt of what we said, and then we'll get in a few more reactions.
रिग्रेसिव थिंकिंग के साथ जो देश आतंकवाद का पॉलिटिकल टूल के रूप में इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं, उन्हें ये समझना होगा कि आतंकवाद उनके लिए भी उतना ही बड़ा खतरा है। ये सुनिश्चित किया जाना बहुत जरूरी है कि अफगानिस्तान की धरती का इस्तेमाल आतंकवाद फैलाने और आतंकी हमलों के लिए न हो।
So, that's the comment there, Ambassador Trigunyat. Let me get in your reaction on this. Straightforward, linkage to Pakistan and then Afghanistan. But is this more for the domestic audience, or is there something else PM has in mind?
Well, actually, if you come to think of it, last month it was the presidency of India at the UN Security Council. And when we started our presidency, Afghanistan was not the issue. And during that month, suddenly it cropped up, and India managed to have 3 statements issued, presidency statements, and also get a UN Security Council resolution passed by 13-2, 13-0 rather, to abstain, China and Russia. Now, in all these, whatever we are talking today, whether it's maritime security, which Prime Minister for the first time had chaired the UN Security Council presidency, or for that matter about the Afghanistan. Now, all these pointers which he has mentioned today have been our consistent theme, which he has reiterated from this global stage. As far as Pakistan is concerned, everybody knows it, and we have all been talking about it. And it has been talked. See, India has a very smart way of responding. We have a right to respond to Imran Khan's speech. And now I think some Pakistanis will also take right to speak against Prime Minister's speech. We'll see that. So this is a standard procedure. And there, our first secretary level, young officer, she blasted it thoroughly. Whatever Imran Khan has said, point by point rebuttal. So that is the way to go, frankly. So I think that as far as Afghanistan is concerned, we have very clearly indicated our policy options, our position, and it has been discussed with the other partners, especially the Quad partners and the other countries with whom Prime Minister met, or the Foreign Minister has been meeting all of them, explaining that Afghanistan needs help. We are ready to help them. and we are helping them. But at the same time, Taliban has to respect the red lines that have been there, whether it is the women rights, children rights, minority rights, and Pakistan must stay off. And it is not only Pakistan. This also means China, because this time the China-Pak axis in Afghanistan may have much deeper and wider repercussions in the region than it was at the last time. So I think that Prime Minister was very clear, categorical, and he has conveyed in the, I think, the shortest possible statement on terrorism, but conveying exactly the message that it is like Bhasmasur. If anybody indulges in that, they are going to be burnt to ashes themselves.
Okay, interesting take. Thank you so much for that. I also say good evening to Alok Bansal, Director for India Foundation, who joins me. But before I go across to Mr. Bansal, quick comment on from Mr. KP Nair on this aspect. Mr. Nair, India's bid for a permanent seat at UN, all the noise that has been generated around it in the last couple of years. Are we a step closer now, you think?
Closer to what? I didn't get you. Closer to what?
To getting a bigger say at UNSC.
Well, I think in the coming year, India's interests on getting a permanent seat will be advanced. I mean, it's still a long way to go, but we will make further progress because we lost 1 year. Last year, under the Turkish presidency of the UN General Assembly, we lost 1 year because Turkey belongs to what was known as the Coffee Club, now known as the Uniting for Consensus, which is a group which includes Pakistan, Mexico, and others, which don't want UN Security Council reform because these countries are not likely to get in, so they want to prevent others also from getting in. So the Turkish presidency in the last 1 year at the UN General Assembly was very partisan. There was no progress in the last 1 year compared to several years of progress in the previous years. But now the Maldives foreign minister is the new president of the General Assembly. And the General Assembly president appoints what is known as the Intergovernmental Working Group on Security Council Reform. So he is expected, being a friend of India, the Maldives foreign minister, but also being a fair man, given his record as foreign minister of a small country and a very forward-looking country in Maldives. I think he will appoint a new working group president who is positive on UN reform, and he will take the reform forward.
Yes.
So I envisage that in the next 1 year, we will make progress.
Okay.
But still, there are many miles to go before we become a permanent member. But we have to keep at it. We have to keep on at it. And with the Maldivian presidency, I'm quite sure next year, this time, if I'm on your panel, if you ask me, I can tell you that we have made progress, and I'm sure we can list.
Mr. Nair, I'm going to make a note of that, and we're going to, next year, after around the UNGA time, get a response from you on this. Padma Rao wanted to make a couple of points. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. The other thing, I was thinking about your question, which you posed right in the beginning, Tanvi. I think that also by emphasizing India's capabilities as far as vaccine exports are concerned, we are the world's largest vaccine producing nation, and also the urgency of climate change. I think, the beating that India's public image took after the March fiasco of the second wave of COVID, both these points are bound to repair that damage to an extent. Now, I wanted to go to what Mr. Nair said, and I completely agree with him about the International Atomic Energy Agency and new position there. I used to be a television beat reporter at the United Nations headquarters in New York in the mid-90s for many years, and I was really relieved to note that Mr. Modi did not, in fact, expand on this very rather vexatious, issue of the expansion of the Security Council. At that time, there was a lot of talk of the CTBT and the NPT and why India was not signing these treaties. So, like like Mr. Nair, I'm very glad to see that has changed. But one thing that is not going to change, which I believe personally is a fairly useless exercise, is, this reform of the Security Council. I mean, just look at the continued face-off between the big five themselves. And now that has even worsened between France and the United States because of AUKUS. So I personally believe that the United Nations is a world body that has seen its heyday. It cannot be reformed, and therefore new world bodies must be set up. Now, last point I'd like to make, what I would like to have heard the PM say or to refer to is to touch upon the question, why no United Nations peacekeeping troops? Why no blue helmets in Afghanistan? Many global analysts have, including the United States, in the United States itself, have actually repeatedly suggested this. Of course, there is a process, and it's a long-winded process. The Security Council has to authorize a mission. It has to decide on its mandate, its size. Takes time. It also needs political consensus. Under the present circumstances, as I said, I can see China vehemently oppose any such suggestion if it comes up. But so far, it has not. There was a Security Council resolution at the end of August that referred to Afghanistan, but it skirted the issue of a UN peacekeeping operation. So in fact, now this is the point I really want to make. The Taliban, as we all know, are very keen to be recognized by the United Nations. Now, this, for instance, could be a bit of a bargaining point, but I'm afraid I don't think that's likely to come up.
In fact, you exactly hit the nail on its head, and I wanted to have exactly that conversation about UN as a body, the relevance of it, us now constantly highlighting and pushing that the relevance will not exist if it doesn't move with times, change with times, and the reforms come through. Will they or won't they? And if they won't, then what's really, what is it that we're gaining out of these addresses year after year? Beyond, maybe having these conversations at the end of the day. Let me ask Mr. Bansal if he has a view on that.
See, what the Prime Minister said was that UN needs to respond to challenges, and I think people need to have a greater reliance on United Nations. In fact, he made a very, very strong pitch for the UN reforms, as you have already brought out. But he wanted that UN needed to act on many issues on which UN has not been responding. And immediately after that, if you realize, he came to the issue of Afghanistan, where I think his focus was. He probably expects the United Nations to do something as far as Afghanistan is concerned, where he focused that Afghanistan's territory should not be used to export terror. He also said that the women, children and minorities of Afghanistan need your help, and we need to fulfill our responsibility. Probably who needs to fulfill this responsibility? Probably the organization like United Nations need to fill, because the present regime, which has occupied power in Kabul with the support of Pakistan, does not seem to believe in sharing power with ethnic minorities, with sectarian minorities. As far as they are concerned, women do not exist. And he also went on to say that certain countries are trying to use the delicate situation in Afghanistan for their own national political aims and objectives. And he said terrorism should not be used as political tools. So his aim was there. Probably through all these issues, he was trying to ask UN to be more proactive on issues like this, because once the US withdrew, we saw what the situation was. And of course, he was bidding that UN needs to be more representative. I think UN reforms is one of the consistent theme which Prime Minister has been making even in his earlier speeches in the United Nations General Assembly. And of course, in his speech, he targeted both China and Pakistan, the two countries without naming them. As far as China was concerned, he talked about India's democratic...
So let me ask you this, Mr. Bansal. Do you still believe that United Nations, even if it, found the will to listen to all these comments that have been made about protecting rights of people, human rights, women rights, children rights in Afghanistan, will be able to do anything about it? And what is it? What is it? What will you make Taliban do about it?
See, as far as United Nations is concerned, it could have done a lot. In fact, the manner in which the US withdrew and the UN could not impose, as of now, the UN has actually not recognized the Taliban government, which is right. And what the Prime Minister said also came in light of what Imran Khan had said. Imran Khan made a very, very strong pitch for Taliban government. He went to the United Nations General Assembly trying to market Taliban without talking about all these issues which Prime Minister raised. So the United Nations need to come up with a proactive. United Nations can also have you can say a peacekeeping force to ensure a certain amount of human rights are guaranteed to the minorities, women, etc., and certain basic norms are adhered to within Afghanistan. If a UN-sponsored resolution comes against that sort of a military intervention, probably that would show that UN has a greater muscle and has a greater reach. As of now, the UN looks like an ineffective organization, while the greatest humanitarian crisis are unveiled. People were falling off the aircraft, flying in the midair. Now, that sort of scenes, I think, has pricked the global consciousness and has troubled human beings across the globe. So Prime Minister's speech was to, I think, the global community, asking them to spur them into action as far as, and he also, I think, obliquely hinted at Pakistan, saying that how Pakistan was trying to use the situation in Afghanistan for its own national goods, had utilized terrorism as a part of its state policy. And he also said that to imagine that terrorism will not affect you, it will also bite you. I think that was a reference to Pakistan, giving them an indication, telling the global community that those who support terrorism would eventually suffer from it also.
Yes. Okay, fair enough. Two people wanted to come in. First, Professor Sheetal, and then I'll go to Chirayu Thakkar. Yes.
It is very interesting, when we discuss about UN, its future, its significance, and the way people sometimes undermine the very relevance of the United Nations. Now, if you talk about that, sometimes we say that UN is no longer any significant role-playing body, international body, and it has to be reformed. Then we are running on two parallel tracks. Number one, that why do we need to reform? Because numbers do matter. It is a representative organization of almost 190 plus individual countries all over the world. And for the big ones, it is easy to form alliances such as multilateral forums, BRICS or Quad or G7, G20, whatever. But a large number of countries do get some kind of representation through the United Nations, number one. So we can never ever say that it will ever go out of significance or relevance. But it is at the same time equally important that what kind of reform is required, because much water has flown under the bridge since 1950s when it was formed. And a large number of percentage of the big countries, the economic might, and the population that was there at that point of time is now favoring the other side of the table. So reforms are necessary. But when will these reforms take place? It is very difficult, because the Coffee Club would never ever let this kind of thing happen. And there are two members which are a little problematic. One very clearly China, and the other one Russia, which is on the borderline, at least as far as India's case is concerned, that if India ever tries to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Now, in this case, China is also reflecting to a certain extent Pakistan's interest. It's not just Pakistan uses China, but China also uses Pakistan in these manipulation and games. Now, the second thing is that what about Afghanistan and what role UN could have played in Afghanistan? Immediately, it's not possible. We have to wait for some time to dust to settle in Afghanistan, then only. Because if in case UN recognizes Taliban, it would be actually finishing Afghanistan altogether forever. That means it is giving legitimacy to Taliban. If it does not, then people would continue to suffer, because Taliban would continue to require, a kind of situation, and sending UN peacekeeping corps itself is a kind of situation that US has withdrawn. One of the greatest, majority percentage of UN peacekeeping force, or the resources that could have gone into it. So what? We have to actually wait for some time in order to let Taliban emerge in a particular, fashion. If I'm saying something which may not be palatable to large number of people, but Taliban has to come out with a strategy that what is their take on governing or of governance in Afghanistan. Say, for instance, they have taken a stand that terrorism or terrorist activity or gruesome killings will not be accepted, but at the same time, it's happening. Right now, they do not know that what do they have to do with the system that they have got. out there as you know, as a form of government. How are they going to run it? So the kind of confusion that is prevailing among Talibanis and how to govern it is the actual source of confusion. Now, if Pakistan supports it, it's a concern for India, because Pakistan is our next door neighbor, and Afghanistan, we know about the history, how we have been fighting this proxy war for a long period of time. Now, yes, certainly UN is a body which has to take a collective call in order to address the issues pertaining to women, children, and all other organs of the United Nations have the capacity to directly, indirectly engage with Afghanistan, not just through the peacekeeping force alone, because then that would be a kind of disaster again in calling, because that would again, Taliban would go and rebound and then start what it was already doing. So we have to actually wait for some time for this dust to settle and then identify that what actually UN can do. But at this point of time, the whole, the entire community, UN nations have to mobilize, have to come onto a consensus that how to deal with situation and how it evolves in the next month, or say 3-4 weeks from now.
Well, okay, I am enjoying this now, because the different views, and I think, you know, before, rather than going into every single line that PM Modi has said, it's more essential to talk about the relevance of United Nations and what as an international body can it do? Can the reforms really come in? Do we expect that to? And will it be able to play a big role in situations like Afghanistan? Ambassador Trigunyat, yes.
Yeah, you know, there are two things my friend Mr. Nair mentioned, and so did the professor, I think Padma Rao Sundarji also, about the UN reforms. You see, the problem of the United Nations and its reforms are only the P5 countries. And it is very easy. I would like to tell you something. It's so easy, make a nice soundbite that XYZ country is supporting you, right? We very well know that none of them really wants the expansion. They don't want to share the table with any other country. And they know it very well that they can say, okay, India should become, but they know that China will never support. Russia will go with China. So it's not, that's a clear thing, the way the game is played out. For the last 15 years, this is precisely what we are doing it. So India continues to do that. So, but if it does not reform at all, there is no other way out. Then obviously, now this time India, as you know, during this period, we also, External Affairs Minister went there and he started taking along all the African countries. The African countries don't have any representation in the Security Council. They should have a representation. So you have to take along. And as far as the UNGA is concerned, I must tell you that every single resolution or every single election that has happened, Indian candidates have won very handsomely, including the day of yoga where 177 countries supported the highest ever. So I think that in the United Nations, if you were to say per se just a head count, India stands to gain immediately the seat there. But that will not happen, mainly because of these P5 countries. As far as the UN role in Afghanistan is concerned, all the UN agencies in Afghanistan are working. It is at the behest of Antonio Guterres, and I must credit him with that, that he started off for this humanitarian relief, and they have generated nearly $1.3 billion, including the amount that has been committed by China and USA and several other countries. A large number of countries are supplying already the aid and assistance to them. But the governance structure of Taliban, as you know, it's not a monolith. And that was made out by Professor Sharma. I think that Taliban really cannot work the way the world looks at the governance structure. They have to develop everything. And it's not an inclusive. Now, even in the Quad statement that was issued, there was no word inclusive in that.
Right.
Now, this is what I'm saying is that we have to see that when we are working on it, we have to look at all the possibilities and all the gimmicks that are going on. India is very keen to be there. It deserves to be there. It claims that right to be at the high table. But I think that my problem is with all the P5 countries, and they'll never change.
Oh, okay, interesting. Chirayu Thakkar, do you want to respond to that? A lot of this is just gimmickry and commentary, which is easy to make, to say, we would like to have you on the table when you actually don't want to, and you possibly also know it's not going to happen.
Tanvi, I was listening patiently to everyone who spoke prior to me. And I think we are not realizing the qualitative difference in today's speech that Prime Minister was making. Now, some of them hold the view, and rightfully so if they want to, that Prime Minister did not speak about reform of United Nations and inclusion in United Nations Security Council. But first of all, you have to realize that Prime Minister made a totally different point. When he was taking on China, he did not take merely China on the abuse of the uses of seas. What he was trying to say was that, look, there have been those powerful countries who are gaming the system. So he took two particular examples. The first example was the origins of virus. He specifically used that word. The second was the recent World Bank report, where as well China tried to game the system. So when up until now, and I have been documenting this topic, and I have like analyzed threadbare the documents India has been putting in out in open for last 20 years. What I'm seeing is there has been one single agenda of India so far, and India was trying to say to the world, look, the United Nations Security Council is not representative, so there should be more representation. We belong to the developed world. We have the largest population. We are entitled to a seat, so there should be an inclusion, and you should support us because it's good that it is more representative. And when we get the representation, we'll support you. That was India's line so far. Today, India is talking a different language. And today, India is trying to tell the world that, look, these institutions are crumbling, these institutions are falling apart. And if we do not collectively envisage a system that benefits all of us, it is useless. And I think the provision of global public good would become a big agenda. If you are reading between the lines what is happening with the Quad, in the world of Quad, what the four countries are trying to the world is that, look, on the one hand, there is China, which gives you 1 cent. It takes 2 cents back from you. There is a squeezing, there is a trapping policy on the one hand. And on the other hand, we are not asking anything from you, but we want to give 1.2 billion doses of vaccine. We want to give you is green technology. We want to give you is climate affordability. So on the one hand, a new bloc is emerging, which is trying to say to the world that, look, you have to be sympathetic to us because there is a provision of global public good. And India is now switching gears. India is now talking a different language, that the reform is not only necessary that you come and support us because it is unrepresentative, because the system is not working. The system is not supporting you, and the system is not supporting your aspirations. So this is the qualitative shift in Prime Minister's language, if you read it the way I am reading it. Now, coming to the reforms and the language, it is all gimmick. Now, I have been documenting this. I have had conversations with diplomats of over 20 countries now, and I have no faith whatsoever in the statements that are emerging. In fact, one Indian diplomat formally told me off the record that United States puts out these documents, and I have documented this in one of my writings, that United States talks to us bilaterally and says that whenever reform comes, it is going to support our candidature. But in the United Nations, in New York, they are not telling that they are going to support us. It is only France, Russia, and Britain that have said to us that they are going to support us. And especially France and United Kingdom are saying to us because they are realizing that they are gaining power. Both these countries have never used their vetoes since 1989. And these countries, they are realizing that they no more have the moral ability. And Ambassador Trigoniath was right that in this particular mission of not sharing power, all five of them are united. And if you want...
No, but Mr. Thakkar, I think what was being said here was also in reference to what President Biden said about, and the ME and the Foreign Secretary himself saying that US President Joe Biden strongly feels that India should have a permanent seat at United Nations Security Council, and whether or not that realistically happens. My apologies to Padma Rao, but I'm completely out of time, so will not be able to come to you. I will, at this point, thank all of my panelists for joining in and really helping us decode not just the Prime Minister's speech and what it means, where is he coming from, what is his message to the world. Message to the world of a pluralistic, democratic society, country that is willing to be part of a new world order and lead by example. A message to the world about how we fought COVID, how we are the vaccine manufacturing hub, and are once again ready to share that with the rest of the world, export vaccines to wherever is required, distribute those vaccines, inviting vaccine makers to come and set up here. From that to also the changing dynamics and various equations between the powerful nations of the world. And to me, what is the most important? To stand at the platform of United Nations and to push for UN reforms, to push for a seat for ourselves, a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council, but also to push for UN to change with times, else it loses its relevance, something that I think we need to repeatedly talk about and highlight. Out of time on this show. Thank you for joining us.